mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.
It's time for another conversation. Welcome to Make It Last podcast, where it's all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, with other people. And pandemic, that's like a buzzword, COVID-19. But in all of that, a lot of us are experiencing what we would call burnout. And for us to talk about that this time around is Jones Loflin. He's an author, speaker, and coach, but most importantly, he helps others to make better choices with their time so they can thrive. Welcome, Jones.
Oh, thank you for having me today, Noreen, on this very timely topic of burnout.
Before we talk about how we can avoid it, for you, define burnout.
Sure. Burnout, I think, is several different things. First of all, I've read a lot about, people's definitions, is that it's a loss of hope. When you're burned out, you just don't feel like things can get better. And so for me, if I'm overwhelmed and just feeling like I can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, that's one sign of burnout. A second one is being cynical. We all are cynical from time to time. I have days when I'm, cynical toward my work. But if I'm noticing every day that I'm being cynical about, what's in front of me and the things that I have to do and my relationships with others, to me, that's another sign that you are burned out. And then the third one is just the physiological factors. Okay. You're tired, you're always feeling drained. You're finding you're not eating well, you're not exercising. Those things that normally help you to be at your best, you just have no interest in. I think that's another sign of burnout. And then finally, you're not interested in engaging in other parts of your life. The relationship with your significant other isn't what it ought to be. You're not as excited about spending time with your children or your friends. I mean, I think all of those are things that are indicators to me that I'm burned out or see someone else who's burning out.
That is why vacation time is so important, but it might be something that you plan to mention. So how then do we avoid burnout?
Oh, goodness. That's the question of the hour is how do we avoid it? I think, first of all, you just said it, Noreen, is that I think we have to be proactive about taking care of ourselves. It's taking the vacations when they're needed, or even before they're needed, if you will. True. It's making sure that you are finding time to renew yourself each day. When you're burned out, you're just always giving out physically, mentally, and emotionally to your job and to others. And if you're not taking that renewal time to say, you know what, these next 15 minutes are mine, and then engaging in those types of activities that renew your energy and, refresh you. I think that's one of the first keys about avoiding burnout. The second one, I think, and we saw this, you mentioned the pandemic earlier. We saw this so much during the pandemic, is that people realized there was a gap between what their purpose and what they really wanted to accomplish in life and what they were doing. True. The type of job they had, the hours they were working. And so I think one of the ways to avoid that is I think you got to stop and reflect on what is my purpose? What are the outcomes I want from my day, my week, my month? What is it I'm trying to achieve? And are the choices that I'm making, not just with my job, but are the choices I'm making with my life moving me toward accomplishing those things? Or am I making choices that are pushing me further away from being able to achieve those things? So I think that's another way to try and avoid burnout. A third one is stay in community. One of the things that we notice when people start burning out is they begin to isolate themselves. They feel like there's something wrong with them, with their abilities to do their job or whatever it is that they're struggling with. And so staying in community and being willing to raise your hand and say, I am just not feeling it this week and this month. And let me just stop right here, Noreen, and say, especially if you are a leader or manager of a team, I think it's really critical that you be willing to speak up and say that to your team. You know what? I'm just not feeling it today. Anybody else kind of struggling a little bit? And everybody else in the room goes, yeah, me too.
It's interesting you should say that, because recently I took what I literally captioned it when I was signing up for it. I call it my mental health day.
Mm-hmm.
We had just finished like a week of activities and just, different things just running into each other. And I said, no, I need to just take a day to just sit and just be still. So I understand exactly where you're going. And I'm trying to encourage some of my team members, because you do get a departmental leave day. Take them. Because sometimes as educators, well, I've stopped feeling guilty if I will leave work and go take care of me. But I have to then remind them that if you have to just give students work for that day, go take the time and recharge and refresh, because it is very important. So I'm there with you. You're speaking right now to the converted, and I'm hoping for those who will listen and watch it, they will get it. But before you go on, I want to just backtrack a little bit. Mm-hmm. The first one, you said it was the whole idea of finding time to renew yourself. For a lot of persons who will listen and watch this, who are usually the ones who are giving a lot and people lean on them. For them, and I'll use the word guilt, for them, they might feel guilty, Jones, to just stop and take time. What can you say to those who are constantly giving so that they don't feel guilty? Because if they end up feeling guilty, it literally defeats the purpose.
Exactly. Oh yeah. If you're sitting there and going, I should be doing something. I should be doing something for someone else. It really does. It's interesting. When I'm coaching some of my clients, and they come up with this, is that, well, I really don't want to because people are depending on me. I'll ask them, would you be a better teacher if you took 15 minutes or, for yourself in the morning? Oh yeah. How would it make you a better teacher? Well, I'd be more calm. I'd be more focused. I'd be more relaxed. I'd say, well, is it important for you to be your best as a teacher for your students? Oh yeah. Yeah. It's just getting them to stop long enough to think through why they're doing it. It's not that they're saying, hey, go away, I'm important. It's, I want to be my best for you. And the way I can be my best is that if I am whole and complete and have as much mental and emotional energy as I can accrue in the mornings or in the evenings, whenever it is, so that I can be my best for you. So I think positioning it as, it'll make you a better teacher or make you a better spouse or parent. That's always helpful, I think.
Okay. Burnout. Are you experiencing burnout? Well, this is the conversation for you to help you to avoid burnout. But we have to take a break and get a word from our partners. We'll be right back.
Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.
Langdo Language Institute was created to meet your language and communication needs. All of our packages were created just for you. We are passionate about language and dedicated to your success. We offer the CSEC English program, the Study Buddy program, the Get Ahead with English program, and the Business Communication program. Contact us at 767-285-0938 or email us at langdolanguage@gmail.com. Because the real question is, how can we help you?
Photography is an art. But more so, photography must come from the heart. Precious moments, priceless times. Take a pic and know it will turn out fine.
BMC Photography JA. Beautiful moments captured. Let's go.
For all your events such as educational forums, workshops, book launches, weddings, and more, contact Noreen Daly, the ultimate MC and event host. Visit noreendaly.com or follow her on Instagram at Noreen Daily Jam. Noreen Daily, creating long-lasting memories.
Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.
Are you taking the time to renew yourself? Have you found your purpose? Just some of the ways that you can avoid burnout. Let's continue the conversation. The whole idea of finding your purpose. And because a lot of people really took the time to reflect, because you had, quote unquote, I don't know if I'd say all of this extra time, but I think during the pandemic, but I think people really took the time to just stop and reflect, and am I really doing what I should be doing? Do you think this is somewhat age related? Let me tell you what I mean by that.
Okay.
Is it that it is for when people say 30s, 40s? Is it that at that point that they probably stop and reflect, or is this something that you're saying should go right across age ranges from 15, 16, as you're just starting to find out what you really want to do? And one of the things that I think a lot of, because I spoke to some young people recently and I said, you have the time, the thinking where you only do one thing for the rest of your life. I think, that's like 20, 30 years ago. So, do you think it is something that just really transcends, age ranges?
Right. I think it is. I don't think there's any question. We tend to think about it more, when we get into our first job or our first significant relationship. And so I think we think about it more than, I think it's something that does transcend, age ranges. And I think it starts with, asking questions like, what do you notice really excites you about the work that you do, or the types of activities that really engage you? When do you feel most alive? I mean, there's a whole series of questions we can begin to ask ourselves to say, well, maybe that's the direction I should be going. Now, to your point of when people are in their teens or 20s, I think culture puts an enormous amount of pressure to do just what you said. You got to figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And people are going, oh, that's overwhelming. And what? And so I think a better question, in fact, I use this a lot with those teens and 20s, is what's next for you? What's next? What makes sense for you to try next or to do next, to begin to figure out what it is you want to do in life? And it's amazing how that takes a lot of pressure off, because it's not what are you going to do, it's what are you going to do next. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of my passions, is we've got to get a culture shift to where we're growing these students and these 20 somethings, but we're not saying go figure out the exact career you want when you're 18 to 20 years old and stay there, because I hadn't do that. Did you do that? Noreen, I don't think any of us do these days.
I'm probably I'm not going to say a bad example, but I remember when I was in high school, I wanted to be a lawyer. When I was in college, I said, if teaching was going to be the job, I'd prefer to sit at home and not work. Here I am 30 plus years later, but that's another story. So
I think that's great.
So it's interesting sometimes how your life can turn out. But I think at the end of the day, people just have to be open. Because I literally one time just got up and said, I don't want to teach, because teaching is the kind of job that the years will pile up and you don't even realize it. And I literally walked away from it for about a year or so, and it literally fell right. I'm like, okay, God, I get it. I'm gonna stop running like Joan. I'm gonna stop that. So I really just think though that it really is a culture shift. And I know people are gonna say, yes, it's easy for you to say, both of you. It's easier said than done. But I think a lot of people who will listen and watch this, who are parents, need to help our young people on this journey, because they really don't need to figure it all out when they're 15 or 16. And if it is that they start in one direction and then shift, it is okay.
Well, and I'm a parent of an 18-year-old daughter heading off to college, and we've had many of those conversations, and she has struggled sometimes because people have these huge expectations of, what are you going to do? What do you think you're going to do? And we have used that language of what's next. What's next is she's going to enroll in education at North Carolina State University. That's what's next. That's not necessarily her major. I mean, she's going to start out in that direction, but she's going to enroll at NC State. Okay. After the first year, what's next? Well, I think I'm going to go, for a second year, or I think I'm going to explore this or do that. But it's just taking that step at a time. And then, because that gives you the space then to figure out, is this really the direction I feel like I need to go with my life, or do I feel kind of like my career ought to be in this direction?
True. Just be open to different experience. So you said finding time to renew yourselves, finding your purpose, and staying community. What else do you want to share with us?
I think the key is it's all about consistently monitoring how you're doing. So often when people are burned out, the signs were on the wall months ago, and they just weren't paying attention. They were just trying to push through. Oh, I'll get through it. I've had this experience before. I think it's making those minor adjustments before it becomes a big blow up in your life. Is saying, what am I noticing here about myself? Yeah, I've noticed that I'm not as excited about going to work the past 3 days. What's causing me not to be as excited? And sometimes it's the workload. Sometimes it's relationships at work. Kind of figuring it out and then addressing those small factors before they all kind of come together. And one day you show up at work and go, oh, I'm out of here, type of dilemma.
I'm smiling because I'm thinking back to when I finally moved out of my parents' house, and what ended up happening is that my father and I just started having like little arguments, and I'm like, I think it's time. And he was not pleased because the time when I literally moved up, my mom was away because she was away for a little bit for the summer. So it's almost like he felt like I abandoned him. But he got over it eventually. He had no choice. But I honestly what you're saying, when you start to see the signs, don't ignore. And I wanted to leave before that big blowout happened, because I think it would have then put a further strain on the relationship that I had with him. As we're wrapping up, any final thoughts on how to avoid burnout?
Well, I think the thing to remember is that we always will struggle with more to do than we can get done. It's just a constant in our society because of expectations of others, expectations we place on ourselves. I think it's just so critical that we're willing to stop and reflect more often on what it is we want to accomplish in life, what's important to us, and are we making the choices in alignment with those values and those expectations? And if we are, I think we tend to see less burnout. We're still going to have too much to do. We're going to feel pressure and stress, but it won't be that long-term, serious condition that we see as burnout today.
Excellent note to end on. Thanks for sharing.
Pleasure.
This was Making It Last podcast, where it's all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, but with other people. I'm Noreen Daly. Until next time.
Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.